Yes, that we are go.
Okay.
When you get all the kind of what's back in there when you need it.
Indeed. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us once again for session 3. This is the last of the scheduled sessions on Islam in America. And if I can, I don't know, I forgot how we move this to the next part.
There was a mouse.
There's a mouse over there, yeah. Right there. So see if it'll work from your location.
I think my...
No?
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no, it works.
Okay, there we go.
There you go. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and begin. So this here is in essence a recap of the previous 2 sessions. So let me give that recap. So the previous session showed 3 basic things. Number 1, that there was, according to some analysts, some historians, that there was a Muslim presence in the Americas before the arrival of Christopher Columbus, and this is really in the form of sailors and expeditions that came from Mali. Secondly, that there were in fact Muslims who accompanied Christopher Columbus in his journey to the Americas. Some people who were called the Moriscos. And then thirdly, as Muslims have being among the kidnapped Africans who were brought to the Americas and made as slaves. So in the previous presentations, we emphasized the last part, the last one, that Africans who were kidnapped, who were brought here as slaves. This is the thing we've been emphasizing because that has more historical evidence, and more importantly, it has a more lasting impact on the fact that Islam was present or is present in the Americas, and particularly the United States. And if you're interested in these details of the previous sessions, then you can find those 2 sessions on YouTube. And the other thing that was emphasized is the Nation of Islam movement. Now, there were other Muslim movements. There have been other movements that associated themselves with Islam. But the Nation of Islam, the NOI, became the most famous of those groups. So this is why they were emphasized. So let me move on here. Now we're moving on to what I think everyone wants to know about, Malcolm X. So Malcolm X, let me open my slide here. Yeah. So Malcolm X is born Malcolm Little. And this is his birthday, February 1925, in Omaha, Nebraska. And I think that a lot of these details are generally known to people. That he is one of course, countless people who were affected by that Jim Crow environment. And just to give like some examples, his father, who was a preacher, his name was Earl Little, he was actually killed by white supremacists when Malcolm was 6 years old. And so the way that he was killed is he was put on a rail, he was put on a train rail and basically killed like that. Yeah. And so people might think of this as some kind of exaggeration, but it was actually a real event. And if you see the Malcolm X movie, which I think most of us at this age have seen the Malcolm X movie, they actually showed this part. And this is actually mentioned in more detail in his autobiography, which is here. So another thing that happened, giving examples of his of the impact of society on him and his family at that time. Another thing that happened was that his family, this is before his father was killed, in Lansing, Michigan, not in the South, not in the Deep South, in Lansing, Michigan, his family was evicted. They had purchased a house. And they were evicted from that house because there was a rule that basically said that the purchasers of a home cannot be non-whites. They cannot be non-whites. So they were evicted from a home they purchased. Okay, and I have to Unfortunately, in these situations, we have no choice but to just summarize points to get to other points. So in 1947, he was convicted of larceny and B&E, breaking and entering. And there enters into what's called the Norfolk Prison Colony for his sentence. And it's there that he encountered the teachings of the Nation of Islam in prison. But let me go to the next slide here.
But he knew about it through Marcus Garvey.
No, no, that's not quite the case. So, Nation of Islam's official founding is in 1933. 1930. Sorry, 1930. Actually, maybe move on to the next slide because it actually has a little bit more detail. So this is his photo, in case anyone knows.
Picture.
It is a good picture, yeah. Now this part was actually, I think, pretty important. I alluded to this a little bit last week. So in the Malcolm X movie, that shows how old we are, right? But in the Malcolm X movie, it dramatized his introduction to the NOI through a guy named Brother Bain. But in fact, that's a fictional character. They put that in the movie, I think, as a way to kind of transition from one part of life to the other. Now, he does encounter the teachings of the NOI in the prison, but it was actually, more importantly, is his brother Filbert. So he had a brother who converted, who accepted the teachings of the NOI, and he wrote letters to him, encouraging him to investigate the NOI's teachings. And this is the source, page 158 of the autobiography. So I try my best to name the source for the things that are shared. Okay. Scroll down.
Copying the dictionary.
Yes. So in keeping with the NOI's self-improvement program, so he copies the dictionary by hand. And also they have a handwriting test. Like basically you have to improve your handwriting. These days, it's probably not important anymore because nobody writes anymore. Nobody writes in cursive. Nobody knows how to read clocks, normal clocks. But that
There's some new research that says that your brain and your hand work better together, and so it's better to do handwritten notes rather than
I agree.
dictionary.
That's true.
In Catholic school, we had to do penmanship.
Yeah.
I'm not so much about penmanship, but just the idea of
Right.
writing.
Yeah, yeah,
Writing,
yeah,
right, 'cause
yeah.
there's a connection.
Yeah.
So that was part of it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in prison, he encounters the NOI teachings as we talked about, and he takes many steps to follow what the teachings that they're given. So copying the dictionary by hand, and obviously consistent reading and study. And he actually mentions in the autobiography, he mentions how for example, the library itself at the prison, they had philosophical texts and texts on philosophy. They had philosophical texts in their library. They had the works on different subjects, and so he was a consumer of those subjects. Yeah. So he never was a college graduate, by the way. So moving through the ranks. So again, according to the autobiography, when he was released, he ends up going to Detroit. Yeah. And, he goes through a variety of jobs and all the while growing within the NOI. And the book actually mentions some details about how Elijah Muhammad actually helped him financially. And, it gets some details. It gets some details like that. But again, we have no choice but to sort of summarize these things in a presentation like this. So Elijah Muhammad was obviously the NOI leader. He sees hope. He sees talent. He sees ability in Malcolm, and he gives him different roles. Which, again, skipping details, he ultimately becomes the national spokesman for the NOI. And they call their places. Sometimes they say mosques, but the term temple was more common. Temple, yeah. So they were setting up quote unquote temples in various places in the country, and so they in the 1950s the NOI experienced a great deal of growth in large part because of Malcolm's efforts. Now there was a question last week as to how many members were in the NOI before Malcolm's joining the movement. And I was trying to do some research on it, and I actually could not find an answer that was satisfactory to me to answer that question. But I did find, and this is another book. Well, I'll show you the books later, but there was a reference in another work here that asserts that, if I read it right, that the NOI had only 7 temples nationally. 7 nationally before he comes. And so when he joins the NOI, ultimately he ends up, again, going around the country. But they tried to really keep him away from those first 7 because they were seen as kind of like, this is where the pioneers are. We don't want to rock any boats. But that's another conversation. Okay, so
So how many were there after his efforts, do you know?
I believe it was. It might have been in the 50,000 or that range, or 100,000. I'm not actually sure right now.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, but don't quote me on that. I might be wrong.
He was a great spokesperson, though.
Yes.
Very talented.
Okay. So in the last conversations, the last sessions we've had together, I admit that I place emphasis on his religious theology and how his religious theology is very different from mainstream Islam. But I want to emphasize here that the NOI wasn't just preaching religion. They were also a group that they grew physically. So they had grocery stores, they had restaurants, they had a weekly newspaper, they had many ventures, real estate. They had many ventures that really sought to grow a nation. A nation needs money. Yeah. So they really had that emphasis. So move on. Okay, and again, I had no choice but to skip ahead to quote unquote I don't want to say juicy things. That's not really a right term, but I had no choice but to skip ahead to those things. So ultimately, skipping ahead, trouble emerges between Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. Now, as I alluded to, and this was actually highlighted in the movie, but also you see it in the literature, that there was a bit of jealousy that was experienced by certain NOI leadership towards Malcolm X. And some of the reasons are, in essence, because Malcolm, he was not only a orator, but he has charisma and, more importantly, organizational skills. So these skills, they attracted some jealousy. And some of the explanations that are given is that if you compare Elijah Muhammad to Malcolm X, I don't know if anyone's seen a video of Elijah Muhammad, an actual video of Elijah Muhammad, he was not a very good speaker when you compare him to Malcolm X. And then he's also the person who was deemed by the NOI theology to be the messenger of God. Yeah. Now, another thing that this is also emphasized in the movie, and to a certain extent, I admit, is emphasized in the book, in the autobiography, as well as in interviews that he did, Malcolm X, is eventually he learns. So eventually, Malcolm X, he learns of Elijah Muhammad's relationships with women. Okay, some of those relationships produce children, and so this leads to an almost complete disillusionment with him. So again, he is viewed as the messenger of Allah, messenger of God. And how he learned that is also a very fascinating story. He goes into this in the book, in his autobiography. And there are some other works which actually has other details which may or may not be true. And I want to say right now, I don't want to really put emphasis on someone's personal life like that. I don't want to put emphasis, but I'm trying to just share this is what happened, because I know these topics tend to be very sensitive. So one of the things that happens is in 1963, JFK is killed. He's shot. And this was a very important moment. So So Malcolm X, I didn't put the exact quotation, but let me sort of paraphrase the quotation. So Malcolm X, he uses the example that he himself is a farm boy, and the chickens coming home to roost, right? So he uses this analogy. His point is that because America has perpetuated so much violence worldwide, that they're only getting what they have planted. Yeah. And so he actually, part of that quotation said, it doesn't make me sad, it made me glad. That's what he said. So what happens is that Elijah Muhammad says, you've made big problems for us. Okay, you made big problems for us because everybody loved JFK, everybody loved him. And for you to make a comment like that at this time, you're putting us in a lot of trouble. So we got to distance ourselves from your comment. So this seems to have just been the excuse to get rid of him. That seems to be the excuse to get rid of him, the pretext to get rid of him. So this is an image of the assassination. So let me move on here. Okay. So again, I have no choice but to skip details. It's not that I don't know the details or that they're not important, but I just have no choice but to skip details. So Malcolm X, he is suspended from the NOI, meaning he can't give speeches, he can't really be involved in a public way, he can't, I believe he couldn't even go for their worship. So he still considers himself a Muslim. And so at this stage, he becomes more open to mainstream Islam. So again, if you read the autobiography or even some of the other works that have been written by other people, even during his career as an NOI leader, he encounters mainstream Muslims. He encounters mainstream Muslims. I mean, mainstream Muslims are living in different places, and they hear of something called Islam and Muslims, and they go to the lectures, and they hear a theology that's so foreign to mainstream Islam. So he knew that there was something called mainstream Islam. He knew all that, of course. And in any case, so one of the things that he does, the most important or the most famous thing that he does is that he makes the Hajj. Now, Hajj is the term pilgrimage. So Islam has 5 pillars. And the Hajj pilgrimage is considered the final one. So if you have the financial or the physical ability to go, then you're obligated to go. But if you don't have those abilities, you're not obligated to go. And it's not as well known, but in addition to his Hajj, to his pilgrimage, he also visits many other countries in the Middle East, and he visits North African countries, and he gives a number of presentations. So this is an image I found of him at Hajj. Now, this is called the Ihram, and Ihram, 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 and women are not obligated to wear it women are not supposed to wear it, I should say, for obvious reasons. But it's basically 2 sheets. Okay, basically it's 2 sheets, or really more like towels. Okay, so the last time I went, it had more the feel of towels. So it has a number of reasons that it's worn, but among the reasons is that it eliminates distinctions of class. So everyone is seen as equal in the presence of God. And this is also seen as a reminder of Judgment Day, that there's going to be a Judgment Day. The rituals of the pilgrimage reminds a person of the Judgment Day. So this was a photo I was able to find of him at the Hajj. Now, at Hajj, let me go back to my Hajj. So when I went for Hajj, I've been there many times, but when I went for the actual Hajj, the Hajj was probably about 13 years ago. I think 13 years ago, back when I had black beard, not this gray stuff I have now. So when I went, it was 1.5 official pilgrims and 500,000 illegal pilgrims. So 2 million people. You get people who overstay their visa or sneak in or whatever to do the pilgrimage. Again, for Muslims, this is seen as one of the pillars of the religion that needs to be done. So When he goes to the Hajj, what does he see? He sees black people, he sees white people, he sees all types of races, all types of situations. And back then, it's not as comfortable as you go now. Okay, if a Muslim goes to the Hajj pilgrimage now, it's very comfortable compared to back in those days. Again, I've been there 3 times, and
What's changed?
modernity. I mean, technology and really what's really changed is the accommodations that are available for pilgrims. So a pilgrim can go and stay at a 5-star hotel and have air conditioned tents and things like that, right? Back then, that really wasn't the case. That really wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. Air conditioned tents, yes. That does happen now. So one of the things he says, and I don't know if I think I marked it here in the book, but one of the things he says when he goes into the Hajj pilgrimage, again, he encounters people of different races. Famously, he says that he ate from the same plate as a white person. Remember NOI theology before? They said white people are devils created by a scientist. That's what they said, that white people are devils created by a scientist in the Patmos Island, right? So, and these people are not just white people, they're Muslim people. So he encounters these people in a way that in a human way that he had never really encountered before. And obviously the Hajj is a very God-centered environment.
What's the purpose? What's the significance of Mecca itself?
Let me finish this and then I'll tell you. Let me finish the presentation and then we'll come back to that. So he says that if Islam is understood, it will solve the racial problems of America. So I don't think he meant that everybody is going to have to convert to Islam. I don't think he necessarily meant that, although I'm sure he wouldn't mind. But I don't think he meant that. I think he meant in terms of getting rid of the distinctions that are any injustice really that is brought by you think that think someone is better than another person because of race, because of color. I think this is what he means. So he comes back from his pilgrimage, and he takes on this name Malik el-Shabazz. Yeah. So he actually used the title Al-Hajj before that. So Al-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz, and Al-Hajj means the one who's done the pilgrimage. And so he founds his own organization called the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. Yeah. And again, it's not that he just all of a sudden just started focusing on religion. He becomes more involved, not more involved, but I should say he becomes a figure that is still speaking on the realities that are happening in this country. So one of the things that many people have proposed that was kind of like signing his death warrant is that he proposes forcing the issue of racial discrimination by taking the case to the United Nations. Now, remember at that time, there was another power in the world that did, actually there's a couple of powers, but there's one country I have in mind that's famous for doing its own form of racial discrimination at the time. Does anyone know what country that is? Not England, although they tend to be the source of all evil in the modern world. South Africa, yes. South Africa. So South Africa practiced apartheid. And you had, at that time, you had Western powers, including the United States, who were preaching all this rhetoric about apartheid. And so Malcolm X is point, like, how the hell can you talk about apartheid in South Africa, but in your own country, you're doing the same thing? So he's assassinated, finally, on February 21st, 1965. 1965, not that long from now. So, again, I have to skip details because the focus or the title of the presentation was Islam in America. So that's why I had to skip some details. So the NOI eventually has its own transitions. Again, skipping details. And so you have a 10-year gap between the death of Malcolm X and then 1975, the death of Elijah Muhammad, the man who was seen by the NOI as the messenger of Allah. So when he dies, his son, by the name of Wallace Dean Muhammad, who he comes better known as Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, he becomes the leader of the Nation of Islam. Now, he had a whole different religious orientation than his father. And in fact, according to the autobiography, he actually mentions Wallace as being a mentor of his. In the sense that Wallace was saying even back then that, look, for the Nation of Islam to grow, for us to have any kind of real spiritual or worldly salvation, then we're going to have to enter into mainstream Islam. So when Wallace becomes a leader, that's exactly what he did. So among the things that happens is, of course, allowing non-blacks to join the NOI. The prayer rituals are changed. The various rituals that were unique to the NOI changed to a more of a mainstream Islamic rituals. So, for example, in NOI in that time, they had sort of a church setup. So chairs. They didn't have pews, but they had chairs. So they had on one side men and the other side women. So that's how they practiced keep it gender segregation. So again, like a church setup with a podium and such. So what Wallace does is Wallace D. Muhammad, what he does is he makes, now it's all changed up. So now they have the carpet that you see in the traditional mosque, the carpet you use sitting on the floor. And so he changes that. And he also changes the name of the organization. So NOI becomes the World Community of Al-Islam in the West. And then in the 80s, they took on the name American Muslim Mission. And then in the 90s, the same group became Muslim American Society, MAS. So eventually he resigns from being a leader of a whole group, necessarily an official leader, but he eventually sort of takes more of a symbolic role. But in any case, more famous than him, I believe that Imam W. Muhammad should be more famous, but he's not. He's not. Who's more famous is Farrakhan, Louis Farrakhan. Now, Louis Farrakhan had been the deputy of Malcolm X during his time in New York and in Harlem. And he is also, as everybody knows, a very powerful speaker. He's a very powerful speaker. Now, he follows Wallace into Orthodox Islam for only 3 years. I don't know what's up with threes. So we talked about Fard Muhammad was 3 years, and then before he disappears, and I don't know what's up with the threes. But in any case, around 1978, Louis Farrakhan resigns from the leadership of Wallace Muhammad, and he revives the NOI. So the people that you see selling Final Call newspapers on the streets, they are followers of Minister Farrakhan. And so this is what Imam Muhammad, W. Muhammad looks like. This is his photo here. Okay. So in his latter years, he died about 13 years ago, about 12, 13 years ago. He did a lot. He was very active in sort of interfaith work and things like that. He met with the Pope a few times, Pope John Paul. So he has a very strong back. He was one of the presidents of the World Council of Religions for Peace. So he's not as famous as Farrakhan, but because of the Nation of Islam at the time, what I'm trying to say here, and let me go to the next slide, is that the majority of people who follow Elijah Muhammad in those days, they follow him into Orthodox Islam. Yeah, they follow him into Orthodox Islam. So Farrakhan's current following are, for the most part, people who accepted his leadership in a post-1980 period, meaning they weren't part of the original NOI. Yeah. So that's why, again, Islam in America, so we have to mention these things. So that network of NOI places, NOI temples, they became places where mainstream Islam was actually practiced. And I mentioned Interfaith Dialogue, and again, that the majority of Elijah Muhammad's original followers, they accepted this transition. So again, these are summaries of what happened. Okay, so now it is looking at Islam in America today. Okay, now, frankly, people are converting to Islam on a regular basis. Yeah, of course, people convert to Islam on a regular basis. Now, I'm going to say this as a caveat. I'm not talking about the United States, what I'm about to say, but according to research, according to the estimates, by 2050, the majority of people on Earth are going to be Muslim. Yeah, and some even say as 2040. By that time, the majority of human beings on Earth will be Muslim.
What would you say about the size of the community here in the U.S.?
Yes, so I'll answer that right now. So right now, Muslims are not even 1%. I think we're not even 1% of the population. Okay,
Is it growing?
It is growing. And yeah, so let me give some examples here. So Islam in the USA today, so yes, people are consistently becoming Muslim, and it has impacts on changing people's lives for the better, and I'll give some examples in a moment. And also it creates discipline and God consciousness. And Islam, of course, has influence in important areas of culture. And again, I've highlighted the African American experience because it's the descendants of slaves who have left a lasting impression, a lasting legacy, from that time. So yes, maybe there were African Muslims here before Columbus, and there were Moriscos that accompanied Christopher Columbus on his journeys. But really, those issues are more disputed, and what they leave behind is nothing compared to the African American presence in this country. So the stats used to be that as recently as 15 years ago, that when you look at the demographic of Muslims in the United States, that the quote unquote convert population, that the biggest one was African Americans, but now that has changed. Now it is Latinos. Latinos are very much coming into Islam. In fact, there is a mosque in Houston called, forgive my bad Spanish, Centro Islamico. Okay, Islam in Spanish. So
when you say he revived, so the white people are devils again in Islam?
No, not at all, not at all. So let me.
That almost
Okay, so here is just the links, the link to my blog, and a link to the mosque website, and a link to the book information. Okay, so now let me go to the question. So
So when he revived the Nation of Islam.
Oh, you mean Mr. Farrakhan? Oh, I misunderstood you. I thought you were referencing Imam Wallace Muhammad. No, you're talking about Farrakhan. So Farrakhan's theology still asserts that whatever was taught in the Elijah Muhammad period is true. So they do believe that white people are devils. They do believe that white man was created by the followers of Yaqub on an island. They do believe that. To today, yes, they do believe that. Now, to be fair, I sometimes think, I've never met Mr. Farrakhan, and I probably will never meet Mr. Farrakhan, but I have a feeling that now at this stage of his life, he probably sees it as political commentary. But nonetheless, in terms of what they are teaching, they seem to still have this idea that white people are literal devils. Yeah.
I have a question about the purpose of the pilgrimage.
Yeah.
And Mecca. What's the significance?
Sure. All the hot questions here. Let me take off the jacket. Okay, so there's there are a lot of reasons. There are many reasons why Mecca is significant. Muslims believe theologically that Abraham, there's a place in Mecca called the Kaaba. So it's a cube building. Okay, Muslims believe that the foundations of it were given by Abraham. That Abraham and his son, that they put the foundations for the Kaaba. And so some traditions even associate it all the way back to Adam. That's one reason. That's the most important reason. Also, Abraham is associated. So the Hajj rituals, Abraham is associated with them. So it's a recreation of actions that are associated with Abraham. And for Muslims believe that is also the place. It's also the place that Muslims when we pray, we try to face in the direction of Mecca. So last week when I prayed here, we tried to figure out which way is the Qibla. So I was praying over there. So Qibla is this way. Other questions or comments?
It was,
Oh, sorry.
I remember hearing that the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem is where Muhammad and Abraham were.
So there is a tradition which says the following, that there is a spiritual experience that the Prophet Muhammad had. And so in this experience, the Prophet is taken from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem, from the spot to the heavens. Now, in the heavens, they call it in Arabic Isra wal Mi'raj. So in the heavens, he encounters various prophets. So at a certain level, he sees Jesus. At a certain level, he sees Abraham. At a certain level, he sees John the Baptist, and so forth. Yeah.
So do you have an personal question? I may be overstepping. Do you have something on your home that indicates that you are a Hajj?
No. Maybe certain cultures do that, but if I don't, maybe that's the genesis of your question. I don't know.
Yeah.
But do I have?
If you walk around in Egypt, you'll find, you know that this person is a Hajj because it says on their home that they're a Hajj.
No, I don't know of that existing in any culture, any culture I'm aware of. But the title Hajj or Haji, it is a respectable title. Now, some people have that as a name. One of my friends, his name is actually Haji, right? But he never went for Hajj. And then they just named him. They named him Hajj.
Something to grow into.
Yes. So.
What are the other four pillars?
Oh yes, sure. The first pillar is belief in one God, and that Muhammad was a prophet of God, messenger of God. Second pillar is daily prayers. Next pillar is the charity, zakat. The next pillar is the fasting in the month of Ramadan, if you have the health to do it. And the last pillar is the pilgrimage. Yeah.
What was the third pillar?
The charity. So Muslims are obligated religiously to give a portion of their wealth, their income, to charity. Yeah. Yes.
So when they go to Mecca,
Yeah.
are there rituals,
Yes.
acting out rituals that
Yes.
mimic the sacrifice of Abraham? And
Yes.
which son?
Yes.
Which son?
So yes, the witch son. Now I'll go with the son part first, because that's actually, I think that'll be very interesting for a Christian audience. So the son of the sacrifice, according to Muslims, is Ishmael. Now, according to Christians and Jews, it's Isaac. Okay. Now, what's interesting about that part, I think, is that for number one, that the name of the sacrificial son is not in the Quran. You know, the story is there, and by context, you can see it's Ishmael, but his name is not mentioned. So what I'm saying here is that what is highlighting is not which son, as not as important as the fact that you're doing something on behalf of God. You're doing something in an act of obedience to God. Now, the rituals of the pilgrimage include a number of things. One of them is circling the Kaaba 7 times and praying to God with certain words, God give me this, God give me that type of thing. Another part after that ritual is done is they call it sa'i, and it's a kind of a jog, so to speak, between 2 points that are 2 sort of like hills called Safa and Marwa. And this part imitates the wife of Abraham, because she's alone in the desert by herself. She has the baby with her, the baby Ishmael with her, and she's worried. Okay, I have no food, I have no water. What the hell am I going to do? So she's running back and forth, desperate, looking for water. And as the story goes, that eventually an angel comes and sort of opens up the land, and water springs forth. So there's something called Zemzem water. And so there, if you go for the pilgrimage, the Zemzem water is free. All they got to pay to ship it to the U.S., but it's free over there. right? So also there is, after the Hajj rituals are done, is that an animal is sacrificed in imitation of the sacrifice story, but a good proportion of that meat is given to the poor,
And what kind of animal?
like lamb, sheep.
Changes, it's not.
I mean, it's not like the religion says you must. I mean, it can't be a rat. It can't be like some kind of animal like that. But traditionally, I would say a cow or lamb. More commonly is like lamb and sheep.
Is it one per day for everybody, or is it one sacrifice per person who's there?
I don't. Can you say the question again? I don't understand.
So if there's sacrifice, if there's 2 million people there
Yeah.
in any one day,
Oh, okay.
are they sacrificing 2 million animals, or for that day one animal is sacrificed?
So, like, which days are which
or is
days?
it only on the last day of the Hajj? Or,
Oh, okay. So, which you're asking, like, which days did it happen and for? Okay, so there is a setup that the Saudi government has to arrange that. So when you go for the pilgrimage, right? You have to, of course, you get visa. You have to pay for the visa fee. So part of the visa fee is whatever fee it is for that animal to be sacrificed. And so, yeah, I would assume it'd be just one. And then the Saudis have a network, or they have a setup where they collect those animals and then they send it to poor countries. That's a setup that they have. So how many millions? I don't know the number.
is it usually one, if you are one person,
Yeah.
you would have one animal sacrificed for you?
Yeah, but when it comes to like when it comes to, let's say, a bigger animal, then people can share the cost. They can share the cost. Yes.
I mean, is there any tradition in Islam for meditation? We talk about prayer a lot.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's any tradition of meditation, or sitting in silence.
I would say yes, and even the term prayer, I think that Muslims use it differently than non-Muslims. But as far as meditation is concerned, yes, there's something called dhikr, or I think more common is zikr, but the actual Arabic word is dhikr. So dhikr means remembrance. So the normative ritual, and done in a ritualistic fashion, is people will they'll sit on the floor and it's all quiet, and they may recite words of remembrance of God. God is glorified. Praise belongs to God. There's only the one God. They'll recite the expressions like that, and just basically sit in thought. So there is a tradition to that effect. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Yes.
Go ahead.
So you referred to the assassination of Malcolm X as being kind of a governmental job earlier. And that was because they thought he could really lead a movement about anti-racism in America through the United Nations.
So I think, of course, these are all speculations, and there's some research on that. So first of all, let's say even if the government didn't officially assassinate him, that they sent him someone named John Smith and whatever, even if they didn't officially do that, they allowed the climate by which he was assassinated, because one of the
Who was it that assassinated him?
So there are like 3 or 4 people who were convicted, but actually in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, those convictions were overturned, and so there's a Netflix documentary about that.
No.
Yeah, it's
So
like,
there's no one being held accountable for
yeah. So it's just like with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was assassinated shortly after this, right? I think it was a few months or a year. He was, yeah.
This was in 65.
Yeah.
February 21st.
Yeah.
I think that's Washington's birthday. I wonder if there's any. I think.
That would be interesting.
Is it? Okay.
But you're on to something there, because 1965 was the year that the Civil Rights Act was signed into legislation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But many of you were teenagers then too, like I was. And do you remember? So, do you remember on the news Williams, like Walter Cronkite, if I could drop a name there, would talk about the civil rights movement and the marches here and the marches there. And they would give snippets of the speaker. Yeah, and then there was also, that's also close to the time of death of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that all
brought
ties in
together.
together.
Yeah.
And there was a movement we kind of see today in another window, but the empathy starts to grow among all the people, well, a majority of the people of the country that says, we have to do something about this problem.
Also, the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was
So-
that span between 1963 and 1968, 5 years.
Yeah.
All of our leaders were shot down.
We're shut down.
You know, in 5 years.
Yeah.
That was traumatic.
Yeah, and it's sort of going back to Malcolm X or even Martin Luther King for that matter. Remember that there was a fear within government circles of basically a black messiah. This is the development they did not want. You have communism, you have the Vietnam War, you have so many social issues that are taking place. So it's well known, although there wasn't the focus of this presentation, but it's well known that the U.S. government had infiltration of all of those movements at that time, whether it was NOI or the followers of Martin Luther King or Marcus Garvey in the past. They were infiltrating all of these movements, all of them, with the intention of undermining these movements. Yes.
So I was really young in '65. Was the Black Panthers, were they an outcome of all of this assassination?
So if I remember correctly, I'm talking about Islam and America and ends up going to different something. But if I remember correctly, the Black Panthers come in the early 70s, if I remember correctly. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
So it would be after.
Yes, ma'am.
Sounds
There
about,
was one
that
very
sounds about
haunting
right.
line in
They
the
emerged.
movie
Where Malcolm X is leading a demonstration.
Yes.
in New York,
Yes.
And something happens, and he snaps his finger. And
Yes. Yes. It's actually referred to in the autobiography.
And the government's response is, that's too much power for one black man.
So that part. So
I think it's
So-
insightful.
so that part is something. If I remember correctly, that part is something Spike Lee put into the movie. That part, but I mean, it's saying because there's a police captain who in the movie he makes that statement, but the story itself happened that there was a person who was beat up by the police, and he goes and protested and it was a demonstration of his command abilities. In fact, if you read the autobiography, he wanted to take some much more militant actions, but this idea was vetoed by Elijah Muhammad. It was vetoed by him, and this actually was perhaps one of the seeds of problems between Elijah Muhammad and himself that eventually emerges with him leaving the Nation of Islam and arguably being killed by the NOI. Because I forgot to tell that part. So the people who were convicted. So the people who were convicted of killing him were members of the NOI. The killers, the people who were convicted of, when Malcolm X was assassinated, there were individuals who were captured at the scene. Okay, so there were individuals who were convicted, and they were people who were said to have been members of the NOI. But recent developments have argued that there was a setup, and I don't know enough of the details about that to really share. But there's a Netflix documentary that has discussed this, and in essence, the assertion is that the convictions were basically overturned, and of course, decades after the fact. Yeah.
Who was he speaking to? He was on a podium.
Yeah. So remember, he started his own organization called Muslim Mosque Inc., and he was still active in terms of addressing the social needs at that time. So he had an event at a particular ballroom. They rented a ballroom, and of course he is. I mean, he's not like a fringe preacher. You know, he's not a fringe preacher. He was somebody who commanded a presence inside NOI or outside NOI. So of course he's going to attract a crowd.
So his audience who was his audience?
Do you mean?
When he was,
Yeah, I mean they rented out a ballroom.
right, but was it NOI or was it everyone or his?
I mean, whoever wanted to come.
Was it in New York or where was it?
It is in Harlem, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, he had broken with the NOI by then, so his followers, because he had his own movement.
Yeah. So yes, ma'am.
With all these powerful, influential people, and MLK not being a Muslim,
Yeah.
was there antagonism with the others because he wasn't?
So actually, it's a good idea to buy this autobiography because he talks about this a little bit. Okay, but so.
John's Cliff Notes.
No. I didn't write that. No, I didn't write this.
No. You're giving us the abbreviated version.
Okay, so MLK and the NOI, they had different philosophical responses to the racism of America, racist America. Okay, ultimately, MLK he advocates first of all pacifism. He's influenced by Gandhi, so he advocates pacifism, but he also advocates integration. Now, NOI says, no, we don't want integration. We want some land. Give us some land and stay the hell away from us. So so they had two different philosophical approaches to the issues of racism. So when Malcolm leaves the Nation of Islam, he does eventually have some meetings, some interactions with Dr. King, but also Elijah Muhammad has some interactions with Martin Luther King before his assassination. So,
And particularly after his pilgrimage, his Hajj.
yeah. So to
the minds.
Yeah, so to my knowledge, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King did not meet until after the pilgrimage. But I could be
But
wrong.
there was some verbal antagonism.
Yeah, because So Malcolm X he basically I don't know if he would use the word sellout, but this would be the general sense, this general idea that he conveyed. Yes, sir.
So in both Islam and Judaism and Christianity, all three would think that Abraham took his son, whether that was Isaac or Ishmael, to Mount Moriah, which is where the Dome of the Rock is currently in Jerusalem, and that's where he was going to sacrifice his son.
So Muslims actually do not associate the Mount Moriah with the
That's more with the ascension
Yeah.
of Muhammad from the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
Not the sacrifice.
Not the sacrifice. The story is there in Islam, but
It's not locationally.
it is said to have occurred, in the same area where the Kaaba is in Mecca. It is said to have occurred in that area.
I think in Judaism they would think that was where Mount Moriah, that location, which is probably part of the political things about Jerusalem, Israel, etc.
Well,
faith.
So I think that if I go down that rabbit hole, it'll take about 10 minutes to talk about Zionism. But I do want to talk about that, but not at this second. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? So I feel like I missed some people. Yes, sir.
What about Mecca and Medina?
Okay.
As to what
the significance?
Places. What is each place?
So
from what?
Sure. So I think Mecca we've already talked about. So Medina is where the Prophet Muhammad lived. So what happens now? Prophet Muhammad is also born in Mecca, but Islam or Muslims don't associate sacredness to Mecca because of Muhammad being born there. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But when Prophet Muhammad was under persecution, eventually he leaves Mecca and goes to Medina. So actually, Medina is just an Arabic word means city. So before that, it was called Yathrib. And when the Prophet moves there, they eventually call it Medina, Madinatul Munawwara, the city of enlightenment, or they shorten it to Medina, or Medina to Nabi, the Prophet's city. So,
And is Medina where he was, didn't he have a vision or something when the Quran was given to him, or what? How?
so it's in the book. It's in the book I wrote. It's in this book. It's in this book. But the Prophet actually has his first revelation of Quran. It occurs in Mecca. It doesn't occur in Mecca. It occurs in a particular place in Mecca. Today is called the Mountain of Light. And I gotta tell you, you gotta be in shape to go up there. You have to be in shape. You have to be in shape. I'm ashamed to say that the last time I was there, I did not go. I was sleeping. All of my friends, they went up there, and I had to sleep. And
Going to the Mountain of Light is not a Hajj requirement.
no, it's not. No, it's not. It's not part of the rituals. No. So anyway, at the mountain, at what's today called the Mountain of Light, Prophet, because there was a question about meditation earlier. So before the revelation to him, he was somebody who saw the society, and he was not satisfied. He was not happy with the way the society was. So there was rampant war. There was poverty. There was a worship of idols. There was a number of things that dissatisfied the soul of Muhammad. And so the tradition says that he goes to the mountain to meditate. And there's a particular cave where he goes to meditate. And there, he encounters what Muslims say is the angel Gabriel. The angel Gabriel tells him the first words of the Quranic revelation.
I really wonder how different America would be if Malcolm X, MLK, JFK all lived. RFK all lived. Yeah.
So, honestly, this is on my way to not last week, but the first session that we had here. On my way here, I was actually on the phone discussing that with somebody, and this person, he said, actually, it might sound bad to a non-Muslim audience, but he said, it's good that it's focusing on Malcolm X. It's good that he's not with us now, because can you imagine in 2026 trying to stay relevant with a podcast? A TikTok channel. In other words, the technology is in such a way that, frankly, for serious thought, for serious leadership, that it's almost a joke now. It's almost a joke. So, in other words, he would have been drowned out. This is what the person was telling me, that he would have been drowned out by Trump's tweets, or by something silly,
What a shame.
Yeah. Yes.
But you kind of think about it too. If those things didn't happen, how would things move forward?
Well, they moved forward, but they're also moving back, right?
Yeah, but it's kind of up to us to make that
I
difference.
agree. I totally agree with you about that.
So it sort of comes a philosophical discussion as what would happen if even the idea of parallel universe, right? So parallel universe, that in a certain universe, so someone famous survived instead of getting killed. Like what would have happened in the world? Yes, sir.
A martyrdom sometimes is what change that's necessary for the change agent to be martyred for the actual change to begin to happen.
Yeah. Actually, in the autobiography, which I think is also in the movie as well, just before he's assassinated, Malcolm X, he's in a dressing room with the secretary or something, and he makes a remark, "This is the time for martyrs." So maybe he has a premonition that something is going to happen, and his staff tried to tell him, like, don't cancel this event. What's the point of you being here? His house had been set on fire. There had been an assassination attempt, with the house being set on fire. So people, whoever it was gunning for him, and so his supporters said, "No, we don't have to have this event." So no, I'm going to continue the event, and so he was shot to death at that event.
Does he have any kids?
Yes, so he has daughters. They were present at this assassination. They were all present. So I'm trying to remember what happened to them now. So the names are escaping me as well. But his wife died a few years ago. She was actually died in a fire, and she died in a fire. And the one of his daughters back in the 90s was accused of trying to hire a hitman to kill Farrakhan. Now, again, it's actually, that part is actually interesting because there is a public discussion between Farrakhan and the Malcolm X family, and they both claim that this was a setup by the government. True or not, but I'm trying to answer your question from what I remember. What eventually happened to them. So I believe that one of his daughters is a professor at some university on the East Coast. He does. They have their own kids, and one of his grandsons, also named Malcolm. He died. He was killed in Mexico a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Juicy.
Talking about the generations after, his kids.
Yes.
This just popped into my mind. This happened like 35 years ago. I remember being at a dinner party, and there was a man that was sitting next to me. I didn't know him very well. We got into a private conversation while everything else was going on in the room, and learned that he was assigned. It was a terrifying job to be infiltrating in with the MLK party, whatever. And he said, "There's so much you do not know." I go, "I know that."
Yeah.
Are you going to give me all? He goes, it's like he had PTSD over it.
Wow.
So that was his assignment.
Was
His
he in
assignment
the
was
CIA?
to be.
It'll be FBI and CIA.
He was incognito or whatever, and he was just by his face and his motions, and he was shaking still. This was 30 years ago, and I thought that has given me insight.
He was assigned by who?
Well, he was in the CIA and FBI at the same time, and all that. And he said there's just so much no one knows. It is unbelievable.
So there are a couple of books that might be very interesting on these details. Of course, I mentioned the autobiography, Malcolm X, Alex Haley, and this one, The Dead Are Rising: The Life of Malcolm X. This is actually a newer one. And it interwoves not just his story, but it interwoves it with the various social and political developments of the United States. So this is also very detailed work. There's some other books out there, but I like these two books. Yes.
So what about, I had asked a week ago and you said you would
Masjid
talk
Sabor.
about it today.
Okay. So the question from last week was regarding a local mosque called Masjid Sabor. So, from what I understand, is that congregation, they were part of the NOI network in the days of Elijah Muhammad, and when Imam W.D. Muhammad became the leader, they transitioned into an Orthodox Islamic practices. Yeah, in fact, I'm sure you've been there many times. So, if you know the gentleman who runs the bookstore, Imam Mustafa. And now he is a good person to talk to about the history of that time. He is very good person to talk to about those developments.
So was that then the first formal mosque in the Las Vegas Valley, or?
So I think it is. I believe it is. But eventually, other mosques form.
And it seemed like I had heard that Muhammad Ali at some point had either gone there. I don't know that he was a ongoing.
So the local rumor is that Muhammad Ali's daughter goes there now. I've never met her. I don't even know what she looks like. So I can't confirm that, but that's been the rumor for years that she lives here and that's the mosque that she attends. But it is true that for that mosque, it's possible that Muhammad Ali did give funding to that mosque, because he gave funding to many mosques throughout the world. Many mosques.
Is it part of CNOI?
Yeah, so yes, and I avoided Muhammad Ali because I know that make it a longer discussion. But Muhammad Ali was he was someone who did join the NOI through the efforts of Malcolm X, and he also transitioned in 1975 towards Orthodox Islam. I was going to say, oh yes, so as far as that mosque, Mike Tyson is also associated with that mosque because sometime in the early 2000s he gave that mosque a great deal of money to expand to its current size. Yeah. Yeah, and he's also obviously Mike Tyson's also a Muslim.
Is it customary to take on a name like Muhammad?
That's a good question, and again, look at the book. But I'll answer it. No more book plugs, I swear. So, in an American context, in an American context, it's common, but it's not religiously mandated. Now, part of the reason that I would say that many Muslims take on, say, a different name. Let's just go back to Malcolm X. Why X? Because the Nation of Islam had this custom. They said, look, your original names were taken from you in slavery. You don't know your real name. So it's just X.
Little was his slave.
That was his slave name, yes. So instead of saying little, it's X. And so then in a NOI context, let's say this, for example, there's more than one person with that name. They'll say Malcolm 1X or Malcolm 3X, right? So that's how they would distinguish. So now religiously, there is nothing in the religion, Islamic religion, that says you must change your name. And in fact, if you look at Prophet Muhammad's teachings from 14 centuries ago, now this is actually very interesting. Among Arabs, there was this custom of giving people sort of ugly names or tough names because they think that giving you a tough name for a tough world. Okay, I'm gonna give an example of a Bedouin name, the name Juhayman. You know what Juhayman means? Angry face. Someone with an angry face. That's what it means. Okay, that's still a name among Bedouins. So anyway, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, this is a phenomenon that he encountered, and so for example, there was a person named Qabih. Qabih means ugly. Okay, someone named their child ugly. Okay, and so Prophet says, no, we're not going to call you that name. We're going to call you Jamil. Jamil means handsome. Okay, another person is named War. He said, no, we're not going to call you War. That's not going to be your name. We're going to call you Peaceful. Content, Salim. We're going to call you that. So you have in Prophet Muhammad's teaching changing names if the name has a bad meaning. But you don't, as a Muslim, you don't have to religiously change your name. But in the African American context, and particularly not just African Americans, but even non-African Americans, a lot of people, they want to change their name to like Muhammad or something like that of people from the Prophet's time or the companions of the Prophet, etc., because they see it as a symbol of having a new life. But to be honest with you, religiously, you don't have to change your name.
Is that a close relation to Allah?
The two different words. Yeah. So two different words, two different names. So in Arabic, the word Allah and the word Ali, there were two different letters. In English, you say A, but in Arabic, we have two A's. Okay. We have an A, then we have what they call it a hard A, Ayn. So literally in Arabic is Ali, but nobody says Ayn in English, right? It sounds weird. So Ali, make it easy, Ali. But in Arabic is Ali. It's Ali. And Arabic will be Ali. Yeah. So Ali, it means high, venerated. Okay. So it does appear as one of the attributes of God, Al-Ali. But commonly people take the name Ali, and Ali also happens to be the name of one of the relatives of the Prophet Muhammad. Yes.
The name Fatima.
Yes.
That seems to be, I've seen it in Catholic Christian tradition. And
yes. So Fatima was Prophet Muhammad's daughter.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. So in the Catholic tradition, if I'm not mistaken, Fatima is the name of a saint, of a Spanish saint, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I'm not an expert in Catholicism, so you may have to consult a Catholic scholar. But
It was You know,
Our
I know
Lady
there's
of
a Our Lady of Fatima.
Yes, but
Fatima was a place.
so I might be mistaken. I don't mind if I'm mistaken. I don't mind to be mistaken. But I think that Fatima was the name of a saint in